So how do you contextualize the source? Students sometimes have difficulty doing this, and this video hopes to help you with this in some simple steps. The first thing that you need to understand is what question and what are you trying to do with the source. So you must be clear about what the question is. Once you are clear about what the question is and what you're trying to do with the source, then the next thing that you ask yourself is, which are the relevant parts? So the source must always, always, always be relevant to the question. The second thing that you need to remember is the source must be something from that time period. If it's a primary source, it needs to be reliable. It cannot be fake. You cannot make it up. So remember these two things. It must always be relevant to the question, and it must always be reliable and from that time period if you're dealing with a primary source. Now let's look at an example. This is an example from your textbook, source 30, page 101. Okay, just take a look at it. And what we're going to do next is we're going to take a step-by-step approach so that you can understand this. Questions, inquiry. So how you use the source is important. There are 1,001 things that you can find out from the source. What does it tell you about merger? What does it tell you about Dr. Shu Cho? What does it tell you about the PAP? What does it tell you about the Barisan Socialists? There are so many questions and so many things that you can ask. So you need to be clear about what you're trying to do. That's what I mean by know what questions you're trying to answer and find the relevant bits. This will pull everything together. A source is meaningless if you do not have questions about it. The first thing that you do is you step out of the source and try to understand it from a larger context, right? So when you look at the source, ask yourself this question: what is the historical question or specific event or phenomena that's being discussed? So if you look at the source again and you zoom out, you will say, hey, this source is about merger. And which side is Dr. Shu Cho on? If you look at the source, very clearly you'll find out that he is against merger. So zoom out, ask yourself the question, what does this source, the gist of it, the main part of it, tell you about the historical event? In this case, he's against merger. You can do this very quickly. Step 2, now you go into the source and now you read each paragraph and you ask yourself which part of the source, which paragraphs relate to the historical question. For example, if your question is, what does the source tell you about merger? Then when you look at the source, which I'm going to show you now, you can see that I've boxed up certain things. So Shu Cho, when you look into the source, is against merger because he's worried about jobs. He's worried that Singaporeans, when they go into merger, will not be able to apply for jobs in the Federation in the same way as citizens of Malaysia. In the last paragraph, he says this. He says, merger does not mean that there will be a bigger share for Singapore. He's saying, hang on a second, there might be unemployment still. He's saying, hey, let's work the terms out first. So now that you understand this, how do you zoom out of the source? Look at the gist related to the question, and then you zoom in. Then only can we talk about contextualization, right? So this is looking inside the source, looking at just this source alone without putting it in historical context, without looking at the provenance at all. Coming up next, we'll look at part 2, where we look at historical contextualization. This is part 2. Part 2 is when you learn how to contextualize the source. In order to do this, you need to step outside of the source and look at the provenance. Look at the time when this source was written. Look at the place where this source was created. Look at the person. The more you know about him, the better it is. and look at the situation that he is in. So let's talk about the first thing, time. So where does this source fit in a timeline of events in that year between 1959 to perhaps 1962 or 1963? How does time impact the way in which he's writing about this topic? What are his feelings? What's the situation? And what's the outcome? So this is the source that you see, and you notice that Shu Cho is speaking in the year 22nd September 1961. 22nd September 1961. Now let's look at the timeline. 22nd September 1961. Where do you place it? You place it between the Barisan Socialists being formed, 29 July 1961, and you place it between referendum on merger, 1st September 1962. So that's when Shu Cho gave a speech. So now let's have a quick rundown about the events which led up to it. The PAP was formed on 21st November 1954. It is a mixture of many groups of political leaders and people who felt very patriotic about achieving independence for Singapore. But it was divided into factions and groups. One faction was English educated, and they had their faith in Lee Kuan Yew as their leader. The other was trade union leaders, and perhaps some were leftists and some were pro-communist, and some of them had perhaps different views on things. But they were clear about one thing: they needed to take part in elections and win as a political party. In August 31st, 1957, Malaya gains independence from Britain. And Singapore citizens are wondering, when is our turn? On 30th of May 1959, Lee Kuan Yew becomes the Prime Minister of Singapore. He promises that we will try to achieve independence through merger with Malaysia. He had also made a promise in earlier elections that he would free those pro-communist and leftists who had been arrested by the British. So on 4th of June 1959, he releases them. However, this perhaps further divides the PAP leadership that they have. Remember, on the one hand, English educated leaders and those who had faith and confidence in Lee Kuan Yew, and those who were pro-leftist and perhaps even pro-communist. Suddenly, on 27th of May 1961, Tunku Abdul Rahman proposes Malaysia. In the meantime, within Singapore, there are things that are happening in Singapore and the PAP which divides the leadership even further. In April 1961, the ex-mayor of Singapore, Ong Eng Guan, resigns from the PAP, takes part in elections, and wins as his own candidate. This splits the PAP in terms of that. In July 1961, there is another by-election, this time in Anson. And again, the PAP candidate loses elections. It seems like there is some kind of divide, there's some kind of party struggle happening within the PAP. On 20th of July 1961, Lee Kuan Yew goes to Parliament and he asks all legislative leaders, all MPs, to give him a vote of confidence. But you know what? He only won by one single vote. What does he do in the end? All those who had voted against him, all those who had abstained in this vote of no confidence, they were all expelled from the PAP. They were all sacked. And the result was they came together and they formed on the 29th of July 1961, the Barisan Socialists. One of them was our man in the source, Shu Cho, and he was the chairman of the Barisan Socialists. So when you put 22nd September 1961 the time when the source was written, you can see that this struggle for power, this struggle that you had in the PAP, this vote of no confidence that you have in Parliament, all impacted the way in which that source was written. Now we look at place. Where was the source created? So what was the purpose of the source and where was it created? And how might this place actually influence the way in which this source was created? The situation. The place was Parliament. And what do I know about Parliament? Parliament is a place where issues are debated on, alternatives are given, and questions are asked. It is part of democracy. And as a result, the place impacted the way in which Shu Cho was giving his speech, because he was a member of Parliament and he was trying to raise questions about merger. He was fulfilling his role as a member of a different political party. He was asking hard questions. Point number 3. Now we look at the person. How does the person influence the way in which the source is written? Who is the source creator? What do we know about him? You might actually need to research a little bit more about the person whom you're studying so that you can place him in context. This is Shu Cho, and he was actually a member of the PAP back in 1958. Goh Keng Swee had actually invited him to be a member of the PAP because he was an anti-colonialist and he felt that he needed to do something to help the people understand that independence was important for Singapore. So this is Shu Cho. He was born in 1917. He came to Singapore from Malay to study medicine. He worked in Kadangkabau Hospital. He set up his own medical practice. He joined the PAP in 58. He ran for elections in Queenstown and won. And then together with former PAP officials and those who had abstained from voting and those who had been expelled from the PAP, he formed the Barisan Socialists on 13th August. And he was arguing against merger. So we know the stand of Barisan, that they were against merger, and he was probably about 40 over years old. He might have felt that he was older and more qualified and more experienced, and therefore he might have felt, note the words that I use, might have, perhaps, he might have felt that he was more experienced and had a better view of what merger should be, and that merger might not be the best for Singapore at that time. So this is how the person's background influences the way in which the source was written. And now we look at the situation at the time. The situation at the time was such that there was a power struggle within the PAP between the leftists and the pro-communists on the one hand, and those who were loyal to Lee Kuan Yew, who were English educated and who felt that he made the most sense. And therefore, because there was a power struggle, the debates that you had in Parliament were very, very heated. That's why perhaps you find that Shu Cho gives a very long speech, almost 7 hours, to reiterate his stand. Because this was a bitter time and a time when Singapore's politics was very, very divided. This situation perhaps tells you why this source was created. It influences the kind of language, the kind of rhetoric, the kind of intense feelings that are stirred up during this time. So there you have it. Time, place, person, situation coming together to influence the way in which the source is created. So now perhaps you can actually think about this. Historical context, not just the source alone, is important in understanding any kind of historical sources. Why? Perhaps I'll leave that up to you to maybe think about it. Thank you. I hope this video has been useful for you.